Hello and welcome to Hot and Heavy, the Elaine podcast. I'm your host, Shivani Desai. Today I'll be talking about Season 3, Episode 15, The Suicide. Hello, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. We are in the final stretch here, about a week away from Christmas. I think I'm pretty well prepared. I'm at the point of the Christmas season, and this happens every year, where I have this panic set in, or panic buying kind of set in. I always have this period of a few days around now, about a week out, where I think I need about 12 more things per person, when maybe I only need 3 things. But in reality, I could use 6 less things because I always overbuy. So every day right now is kind of resisting buying more stuff. And as we all know, our devices are listening all the time. So I am getting bombarded with ads for things that I'm like, oh, yeah, that's great. Oh, that's so cute. Oh, I think I would need that. No, I don't need anything else. I think I've done a good job. And I feel pretty good about what I have gotten my husband for Christmas. He is very tough to shop for. So I always just kind of go, you know what, I'll just get him a few, what my mom calls just tokens. She has an Indian accent. I'm allowed to do it. Don't worry about it, guys. But because he's the guy that buys himself whatever he wants, I will just kind of get him just little trinkets and little things here and there that maybe he won't buy for himself, or more like necessity type things, like he needs chapstick all the time. He never has chapstick. So that's his stockings full of it. But this year, I thought a little bit outside the box. So I'm pretty excited. I think I did a good job. Other than that, I just started recently listening to a new podcast. It's called Smartless, and it's hosted by Jason Bateman, Sean Hayes, and Will Arnett. It is hilarious. No surprise. I mean, if you're a fan of those 3 men, you wouldn't be surprised, but they're hilarious together. They're very self-deprecating. It's called Smartless because they consider themselves real big idiots. So they try and get guests on the show that will make them smarter. And that really, that's a broad range of types of guests, from NASA scientists to their actor friends. But anyway, I was looking through the episode list, and well, no surprise, I had to first listen to the Julia Louis-Dreyfus episode, which was so funny and so great. And she told a story about this really made me laugh. And I love that she told this story to 3 men. And she even said it. She's like, you're 3 men, but I don't give a shit. I'm going to tell this story. It was in response to, I believe, Sean Hayes asking, were you always funny? Were you always the funny one? And I've heard her talk about how, well, her whole family was funny. And she did. Yeah, she loved to make people laugh, but it wasn't like she was the one funny person in her family. She just was a part of funny people in her household. So she told a story about how she had started her period pretty early, so around age 11 or 12. And I think she was the first of her friends to start her period. And the day she started was also the day of a school dance. And all of her friends knew that she had started her period. And so it was like big news with her friend circle. And so she arrived at the dance and she said, look, in those days, it was sanitary pads. There were no tampons yet. And they were bulky, that wasn't like they are now, like streamlined and very thin, and you don't even know they're there. So she did this physical comedy bit. She walked into the dance and saw her friends across the way, and to sort of, again, the news of her starting her period was still fresh on their minds, and it was the big news of the day. And apparently she saw them across the gym and decided to do like this sumo squat walk towards them because she was wearing her bulky sanitary pad. Oh my gosh, how funny is that? But she said that it fell flat. She's like, they didn't really think it was funny. I certainly didn't get asked to dance at that dance by any boys. I just thought that story was hilarious. I also really recommend Smartless. It's a really great podcast. You can listen to it wherever podcasts are found. Okay, so let's get into this episode. The synopsis for this episode from my coffee table book is as follows. Jerry starts a relationship with a woman whose boyfriend is in a coma after attempting suicide. Jerry worries that big mouth neighbor Newman will reveal the affair to the coma victim as soon as he recovers. George gives his dream vacation to Kramer after a psychic predicts a catastrophe. Elaine's hunger overwhelms her while fasting before her x-ray. This episode is written by Tom Leopold. The first scene, we're in Jerry's apartment. Elaine is snacking, and Jerry kind of calls her out. What? We're going out to dinner. Why are you snacking? But then we find out that she has to fast for 3 days for an ulcer test. And he just says, how are you going to do that? And she says, I don't know. I mean, how could I have gotten ulcers? Who could have given me ulcers? Then she kind of has this moment where she looks at Jerry real quick like, maybe you did. Jerry exits to throw out his garbage, sees George in the hallway, and offers George 50 cents to take his garbage out. George says he won't touch it for less than $2. They go back and forth a little bit. And then George is excited to tell Jerry, oh, it's all organized. I'm going on vacation to the Cayman Islands on Friday. And Jerry's just like, who goes on vacation when they don't have a job? What, do you need a break from getting up at 11? And then a very attractive woman comes out of the door from Jerry's neighbor's apartment, and it's a woman named Gina. Now, Gina is played by a woman named Gina Gallego, and she starred in many soap operas back in the 80s and the 90s, along with plenty of other popular shows at the time. And she's still working today. I saw some projects that are still in the works. But yeah, as recent as 2020, she's had some television and film projects. And I recognize her from a very bit part she has in the movie Erin Brockovich. I love that movie. She's Mrs. Sanchez. She's one of the lawyers in the meeting when Erin goes off on all those stuffy lawyers from the big, intimidating law firm. And she's perfectly fine as Gina. I think she plays it as written. There's really no comedy to the role. I really don't have an issue with her performance. I just have an issue more so with the character and that it exists at all. But I'll get more into that as we go along. She says she loves Drake's coffee cake. And after she says she hasn't had a Drake's coffee cake since she was a little girl, Jerry says, I want you out of here. I guess that's Jerry flirting. And she touches his arm as she laughs. Well, then right at that moment, the boyfriend comes out. He doesn't look too happy. Jerry asks how he's doing. Good enough. They put the trash right outside Kramer's door, knock on the door, and leave. And Kramer grabs it, and he's very interested. It's like a treasure for him. When they come back into the apartment, Jerry says, who was with that guy? What guy? My neighbor. Oh, that creepy guy? Did he think I was flirting with her? He didn't seem too happy, George says. Then all of a sudden, George realizes he had a dream about that guy. I haven't thought about him in months. And George says, I've been a part of a lot of paranormal stuff. And Elaine says, well, I have a friend who goes to a psychic. Maybe we should go. And George really wants to go. So then they have to leave. Time to go to dinner. Elaine asks, what did Gandhi, what did he eat before a fast? And Jerry makes a little joke about Triscuits. He loved Triscuits. The purpose of this scene, we're setting up the storylines for Elaine, Jerry, and George. And my take, I'm really not a fan of this opening scene. It just doesn't flow very well, and it's really not that funny. I mean, there's a couple funny moments for sure. I do like the line, what do you need, a break from getting up at 11? And then I heard he polished off a box of Triscuits. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be offended by that as an Indian person, but it's just so stupid. How can you be offended by it? But it's just a lot of jokey stuff that just doesn't seem very funny to me. Almost what I talked about before, that setup joke kind of format. It felt a little bit, not exactly like that, but it felt like that a little bit too much. And maybe it's because it's a Tom Leopold episode. I'm sorry, but it didn't have that same natural flow or pacing that a Jerry or Larry episode has. And I'm just going to reveal this from the top here. I'm not a fan of this plot with Jerry and Gina and the boyfriend. It is the A story, but it's so weak. And that flirty moment between Jerry and Gina, the one that the boyfriend Martin walks in on, it's so awkward and uncomfortable to watch. I mean, they just needed some better direction here. Her arm placement is really strange on his upper arm / shoulder. And the whole, I want you out of here. Like, what? It's just very, very awkward. The entire plot for Elaine is introduced early in the scene, but then it's sort of pushed to the side when I don't know, to me, it's the more interesting of all the plots. And I really don't like the moment where she's like, who could have given me ulcers? And then she scowls at Jerry. It makes no sense. And it's just a very forced comedic moment. And it's not even that funny. We're not even like 4 minutes into this episode. And I already have a swap out, basically in general terms, way less of Jerry and Gina and more of Elaine's and George's storyline. We have a short scene next. This is when we're at Jerry's apartment and Gina's pounding on the door. Martin tried to kill himself with pills. They have this little back and forth about his robe. No, go ahead. No, I'll get a robe. No, I won't get the robe. Okay, it's not even worth talking about. It's very stupid. And then the next scene, we're at the hospital. He's in a coma. And Gina says he did this because she broke up with him that night. She just couldn't take it anymore. He's just a jealous person. In fact, he does not like Jerry and doesn't like Drake's coffee cake. He was screaming about it all night. It's too sweet. It falls apart easily. And Jerry says, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cause any trouble. I was just being friendly. I wasn't. Gina reveals, no, she's thought about Jerry many times. Have you thought about me? And Jerry's kind of nervous. Do you think he can hear anything? Screams in his face, Martin! Then Gina just gets really fired up. I wish he was dead. And she's like, I'm going to pull this plug. Jerry stops her. Then he checks his watch and Gina gets really offended real fast. Says, if you want to leave, just leave. And he says, no, I just wanted to know what time it was. Then if you want to stay, then you kiss me right here. Literally over Martin's body. She's trying to kiss him. And he won't do it. He respects a good coma. And she loses respect for him. What kind of man are you? The next scene, we're in Jerry's apartment. Kramer enters, asks if Jerry heard about Martin. Yeah, I heard. He's got my vacuum cleaner. Jerry says, how do you know about Martin? Well, Newman, he's good friends with him. Oh, big mouth Newman. Jerry asks Kramer, well, how long do you have to wait for a guy to be out of the picture before you ask out his girlfriend? Oh, Gina? Why wait? Why not call Dr. Kevorkian? Fun fact, Dr. Kevorkian, or Dr. Death, was from Royal Oak, Michigan, which is my hometown. Just some useless knowledge for you. Jerry tells Kramer about Gina trying to get him to kiss her, and he didn't do it. And even Kramer's like, what kind of man are you? Well, I didn't know what the coma etiquette was. There is no coma etiquette. And then he talks about, no, these coma victims, you can loot them. Give them 24 hours. If they're not out of it by then, it's a land rush. There's nothing left when they wake up. And that's why he wants to get his vacuum back. The next scene, we're at the psychic reading. George is getting a reading from a woman named Rula. Rula is played by Mimi Lieber, and she has guest starred in many, many television shows and films since the late 70s. And I remember her specifically as one of Joey's sisters in Friends. There's an episode where Chandler makes out with one of Joey's sisters, and she was married to Reese. That's how she says it. She's good in this role. I like her. And I like this interaction she's going to have with Elaine very soon. And it's a very solid performance. I like Mimi Lieber a lot in this role. And she tells George, well, Martin came to you, George, because you're special, basically. Do you know Pauline? Wait a second. My brother once impregnated a woman named Pauline. A brother? What? I think this is one of the things like Jerry's sister was mentioned in the Chinese restaurant episode. We're just supposed to forget about any and all siblings mentioned. And George asks about Audrey. We'll call back to the big nose episode. He says she had a very big nose. Rula sees her, but with a small nose. Yes, she had a nose job. Will she ever speak to me again? Not in this lifetime. While she's telling George this, Rula lights up a cigarette, and she is pregnant. And Elaine asks, should you be smoking? Oh, does it bother you? You're pregnant. Oh, she smoked with Faithy, she said, the little girl sitting on the couch. And then she turns the card over and says, oh no, I don't know about this trip to the Caymans, George. Elaine won't let up. She says, it's really bad for the fetus. And George is like, Elaine, shut up. She's got to tell me something about this trip. But Elaine won't stop. Elaine says, with everything we now know about prenatal care, how can someone put a cigarette in her mouth? Elaine, it's disgusting. Rula's had enough. I want you both to leave. She throws them out. But George really wants to know, well, what is this? What did you mean? Why shouldn't I take this trip? And Elaine exits saying, I'm good. I don't want to be around someone who's so irresponsible. George is trying to get her to just give him any kind of a hint, but she's done. Lupus? Is it lupus? Purpose of this scene, we're just moving along the George storyline in regard to his vacation. And my take, this is definitely the strongest scene in the episode. Great performances all around, really good pacing. And in this scene, we get introduced to calling out disgusting behavior Elaine. Okay, I love this so much. And because I sort of have some experience with this. Now, I will say I wasn't as brave as Elaine to call it out, but at my first job out of college, I worked with a woman who openly smoked while pregnant, and it infuriated me. This was back in 2002, so like 11 years after this episode aired, and arguably with more data and more research revealing, yeah, guys, smoking while pregnant, don't do it. And yet this woman did it with no shame. And I just remembered being so disgusted by her and just how unapologetic she was about it. And I was pretty young at the time. I was only 23. And like having my own kids or being pregnant wasn't even a blip on my radar. But whenever I would see her, I would think about the women who maybe were having issues getting pregnant or had complications during pregnancy or babies with birth defects through no fault of their own. And yet she's just doesn't care and does something so risky. Oh, it made my blood boil. I got so mad. And again, I wasn't as bold as Elaine to call her out, but when I'd walk past her, she'd be in a group of the smokers. There was always a group of smokers out on this little patio area. And in my head, I'd be yelling really loud. A couple of years later, I happened to be working on a project with this woman. She was on the team. And so I had to be in meetings pretty regularly with her. And at that point, that baby that was in her womb while she was smoking was about a year and a half to 2 years old. And before meetings would start, everyone's chatting. She would openly talk about some breathing problems her kid had and that he was on an inhaler already. Oh, all this innocence in her voice, as if she had no idea why that was happening. Oh, I would just have to bite my tongue when I really wanted to say, gee, I fucking wonder why. I don't know. Maybe it's because you smoked for your entire pregnancy and still smoke around him in probably very enclosed areas. Okay. All right. Sorry. I just had to get that off my chest. There was another time when I was the very first time actually I saw a pregnant person smoking was in high school. I think I was in 10th grade and there was an 11th grade girl who had gotten pregnant and she attended school until she gave birth. And that was rare. I remember a handful of girls getting pregnant in my high school, but they would sort of disappear once the news broke and you're like, oh yeah, I haven't seen them in a few months. But this particular girl, she stayed in school. So she was openly pregnant, walking the halls of my high school, and she openly smoked. And one day she was outside smoking and I was walking towards a car, no doubt, of a friend who I was bumming a ride from. And this female teacher came out and started just yelling at her, going off on her. And I'll never forget what this girl said back to this teacher, screamed back to the teacher. She said, I don't want this kid and I'm giving it up for adoption anyway, so who the fuck cares? I wanted an abortion, but my grandma wouldn't let me. And that teacher didn't know what to say. You could tell that just kind of made her freeze up and she glared at her. She had tears welling up in her eyes and she just walked away. And then that same girl punched the brick wall and had to go to the nurse because her hand was all bloody. But wow, I mean, for someone especially like I was back then, very sheltered, very innocent, just it was really disturbing. It was a really disturbing scene. And even to this day, when I think about it, it's pretty disturbing. But that was the first time I had seen that. And, now looking back, I think about maybe that teacher was going through something with her own fertility or you never know. You just never know what's going on behind the scenes. And especially with something as delicate as getting pregnant and starting a family, like those types of issues, there's so many layers to it and you should never assume one way or the other what people are going through. So yeah, just as I've gotten older and I think about that incident, I just go, wow, I bet that teacher, because she was probably younger than I am during that confrontation. So I don't know, just those things that you'll never know the answer, but you just think about. Okay, so that took a dark turn. I apologize. But the whole point being, nothing good comes from smoking while pregnant. Okay, people, George didn't get his whole psychic reading. That's the tragedy of this episode, obviously. But back to Elaine and her actions in this scene. I mean, I love that they gave her this moment. And as a character at this point, we have no clue if Elaine wants kids or opinion on kids, whatever it is, but she definitely has an opinion on irresponsible behavior like this, and she will not let it slide. I only wish I had an inner Elaine during that job when I saw that woman just so brazen and smoking while she had this huge pregnant belly. But alas, my inner Elaine only came out later in the form of the Elaine dance and yelling for a peach muffin top. Damn it. All right, so next we are at Jerry's apartment. Gina has stayed over. So she's gotten over her whole, "you're not a man," but she doesn't like its toothbrush. It's too small for someone with such a big mouth. She asks him, "What will you do if Martin wakes up? Run away like a little mouse?" And he says, "No, more like the Three Stooges." And she doesn't know about the Stooges, and Jerry will show her the Stooges. So she says, "Come, walk me to a cab." Jerry doesn't think it's a good idea being seen in the building together. Right away, she gets mad again. "You're not a man." And Jerry relents and says, "Okay, I'll walk you to a cab." Well, as soon as they open the door, Gina's hanging on his arm. Newman is exiting with Kramer from his apartment and sees them together. "Hello, Gina." "Hello, Jerry." "Hello, Newman." Our very first hello, Newman. Pretty cool. All right, so the next scene, we're back at the hospital. Jerry's worried about Newman telling Martin. George is annoyed with Elaine. "People smoke, Elaine. My mother smoked." Elaine, now I think she's there for her x-ray. It's not really clear why they're all at the hospital. I think they're there to support Elaine / visit Martin. I don't know. At any rate, Elaine is waiting on her test. She is delirious. She looks completely out of it. And she gets very startled because she swears she saw that wall move. Then she asks the nurse, "When will I have my test?" And the nurse says, "We'll call you." Oh, poor Elaine. Can you imagine? 3 days? No eating? Then she asks a very good question. "How do we know if the dog food's any good? Who tastes it?" Jerry's like, "Whew, she is really hungry." Reminiscent of how hungry she was in the Chinese restaurant episode. Kramer walks up and announces that Newman's there visiting Martin. And George, he just says, "Forget it. I'm not going to go on this trip. Something bad's going to happen." So he offers Kramer his ticket to the Cayman Islands. And Kramer, of course, is all about it. The purpose of this scene, we get to see Elaine at the end of her fast, waiting on her test. Jerry and George are worrying for different reasons. My take, I love JLD's performance here. I mean, this ulcer test plot is pretty flimsy of a plot for her, even though I think they could have dedicated more time. They could have made it better. But this is one of those instances where JLD takes the little she's given and converts it to some gold comedic moments. The look on her face when the scene starts is perfection. She's not even hearing anything George is saying. He's going on about smoking and why did you have to do that? She's just staring off into space. I absolutely love that expression on her face. Even though I don't watch this episode often, it's definitely not on my highlight reel. This scene sticks out as a really funny comedic scene for JLD. That dog food part always makes me laugh. When she looks at Jerry and says, "Who tastes it?" It makes me laugh every time. Next, we're in Martin's hospital room. I'm just going to go through this really quick because I just find this whole scene annoying. Kramer's yelling at him, wants his vacuum cleaner back. Jerry enters. Newman is quite the smug bug and says, I hope Martin stays happy when he wakes up, but you know what? I'll bring him up to speed, all the way up to date. And then Kramer's trying to help out, says, "Look, George has tickets to the Cayman Islands." Newman's not interested in that. But Jerry taking out a Drake's coffee cake. Newman starts drooling because he's fat, guys. So, of course, the fat guy wants the Drake's coffee cake. Yeah, not great. And so, apparently Drake's coffee cake that he can buy for himself is enough for him not to tell Martin about Jerry and Gina. He starts begging for it. I mean, okay, I won't say anything. I swear on my mother's life. The next scene, we're back in the hallway. Elaine is fantasizing about mountains of duck, not fatty, juicy, tender breasts of duck. So this is just a continuation of Julia Louis-Dreyfus's hungry and delirious performance. I love the little fingers in the mouth as she's describing the duck. It's really funny. Then all of a sudden, George sees Faith, the daughter of Rula, and chases her to Rula's room where she's in labor. And he's trying to apologize for Elaine, and he's trying to still get her to say why he shouldn't take that trip, because she says it even through her contractions. Don't go on that trip, George. But still doesn't get the answer. In the next scene, we're back in Martin's room. Elaine bursts in. How dare they keep a person waiting like this? She's at the end of her rope, and when she sees that Drake's coffee cake in Newman's hand, she just lunges for it, and he says, Jerry, you better stop her, otherwise I'm telling Martin. And he's trying to stop Elaine, but it's too late. All the commotion, Martin stirs and wakes up. Before we know it, he's strangling Jerry, and Elaine is eating the Drake's coffee cake with reckless abandon. The purpose of this scene, we see Elaine run out of patience and grab that Drake's coffee cake, which ruins Jerry's deal with Newman. So that results in Newman finking on Jerry to Martin, and, well, Martin retaliates by choking Jerry out. My take, the best part of this entire scene is Elaine. It's no surprise that I think that, but I'm also so uninterested and bored with the whole Martin, Jerry, Gina, Newman storyline. It's just anything to disrupt that, I'm fine with, and it's JLD doing it. It's great. Julia Louis-Dreyfus eating the cake at the end like a rabid animal is also very hilarious. And the last scene, we're back at Jerry's apartment, sort of a bookend to the first scene. They're going to dinner again. Elaine has to start the fast. And George says, being part of a birth, that was disgusting. Kramer is back from the Caymans. He had the greatest 4 days of his life. They were shooting the Sports Illustrated issue. He hung out with the models, played nude backgammon with Elle Macpherson. But you know what? He did step on a jellyfish the second day he was there, and it sort of stung. That must have been it. George, of course, is just like, are you fucking kidding me? Elaine buzzes, and Kramer asks where they're going, taking Elaine to dinner because she has to start that fast. But Kramer can't go. What, are you getting together with Elle Macpherson? Oh, I gotta call her back. Oh, funny. All right, I'm going to take a quick break, and I will see you on the other side. What a great sound. That was a baby whose mother didn't smoke while he was in the womb. His lungs are healthy, his brain is healthy, his birth weight was healthy. Basically, he's a really healthy baby because his mother decided, you know what? I know my mother smoked and my grandmother smoked, but since then, in the last 40 years, medical research has found out that smoking while pregnant can really fuck up my kid, so I'm gonna quit. Ooh, what a terrible sound. That was a baby whose mother smoked during pregnancy. He was a preemie, has respiratory issues and a heart defect. Basically, he's been given a pretty shitty start to his life because his mother decided, you know what? My mother smoked. My grandmother smoked. So I'm going to ignore all the research from the last 40 years about how I could really fuck up my kid. So I'm not gonna quit. Don't smoke while you're pregnant. If you need help quitting, talk to your doctor. There are tons of resources out there. When I Googled "help me quit smoking," 147 million results came up. Put in the effort. I know you can do it. Give your kid a chance to start his or her life as healthy as possible. Oh, and don't start smoking again after you give birth, because secondhand smoke, it sucks a fat one too. Please quit smoking, because I'm judging you, and I'm not the only one. And we're back. There weren't any worthwhile things in the extras this week, so we're going to jump right to Contributor Corner. Greg sent in some thoughts, and he says, the plotline they gave Elaine in this episode was minimal, but what she does have, she works well with. As her hunger makes her more and more delusional, she plays it hilariously, even if it is goofy. I like that she tagged along with George to the psychic and the ensuing argument about smoking being bad for the fetus. She gets so passionate, just like she does when it comes to abortion and animal rights in other episodes. Elaine always speaks up. Yes! I've already gone on about how much I love that about Elaine. And yes, this episode is no different. Love it. Greg goes on to say, I do like that we finally get to see Wayne Knight as Newman, a character that was perfectly cast as Jerry's nemesis for the rest of the series. He's a highlight of this otherwise dumb episode. Agreed. Yeah. I think I did see in the notes about Nothing that he auditioned, I think like a week before they filmed the episode. It's just, sometimes I don't mean, I shouldn't be surprised, but sometimes it does shock me how quickly sometimes these things happen as far as casting goes, especially when someone is as perfectly cast as Wayne Knight as Newman. He's a classic character. He's such a huge part of this show. He does shine in this episode right off the bat. You can just tell everything, his vibe, it's everything he's supposed to be to Jerry is palpable right off the bat. And yeah, he does a great job. And finally, Greg says, all in all, this is not one of my favorite episodes. The whole premise is ridiculous, and Jerry's storyline being the main one is never a good sign. The dialogue contains a lot of dated references like Sonny von Bulow and Dr. Kevorkian, which don't hold up so much. I dislike the cheesiness of Jerry dating a woman whose boyfriend is in a coma right in front of them, as if she is daring to do something despicable, and this supposedly makes her desirable. She sucks as a human being. Also, what are the chances that all of these people would be in the same hospital at the same time? Convenient in order to wrap up all of the stories. And lastly, as is my complaint often in the early seasons, Elaine just wasn't in it enough. Yes, I agree with everything. We are very much on the same page. This episode, it's just, it's too ridiculous, these storylines. And there's no chemistry between Jerry and Gina. It's like this ice cold air between them. I mean, it's just not great. And yeah, I agree with the whole, everyone being at the hospital at the same time. I get it. It's the dovetailing that we've heard about, but not to I keep throwing Tom Leopold under the bus, because I also know that the process too was there was a writer of the episode, but Jerry and Larry definitely would put their finishing touches on it. So it's not as if this went into production without Jerry and Larry having some say. And so I'm just surprised that they stuck with this storyline, because it feels very sitcom-y for a show that doesn't typically feel like a sitcom. So that's my thought. Thank you so much, Greg, for sending in thoughts. And if you'd like to become a contributor on Hot and Heavy, please email me at elainepodcast@gmail.com. That's elainepodcast@gmail.com. My favorite Elaine moments, it's the whole scene where she calls out Rula. Everything she says there, I love it. Now, there is one other moment that I want to call out. It's during her delirious hunger phase at the hospital. It's such a small moment, but it makes me giggle every time. It's after she does the whole startled by the wall and then who tastes it about the dog food. When Kramer enters, Elaine just goes, Kramer. I don't know why. It's so small, but I love it. It's hilarious to me. What a funny choice. She sees Kramer and it's almost like she's so amused and pleased and delirious. She's Kramer. She's sort of announcing him. Whatever the choice is, it worked. I thought JLD was brilliant in that small moment, but those are the small moments that really sets her above so many others for me. And my final notes. This is, again, not a highlight reel episode for me, but the JLD making lemons out of lemonade acting performance, it always impresses me for this episode. And I'll say it again, fasting for 3 days and what that can entail. I just feel that's a gold mine of comedy. And when you have Julia Louis-Dreyfus in your arsenal to pull that off, I mean, come on, what a wasted opportunity. And everything with Martin, Gina, and Jerry, it was tiresome. The comedy of all that really just fell flat for me. And not because it's about a dark subject, but because it just wasn't executed well. You can tell this was not a complete Larry and Jerry episode. It didn't have that flavor of finding the funny in the ordinary at all. I mean, there had to be a suicide attempt, a coma, Jerry kissing the girlfriend in a hospital room. Like all of these setups that seemed to be the comedic pillars of the episode, but they just didn't hold up at all. I liked George's plot, maybe not as run-of-the-mill or ordinary a scenario, but I think, maybe seeing a psychic, that's common enough and played into George's neuroses that I bought it and I enjoyed it. So I think we could have fleshed more of that out. And then, well, talk about Elaine having very little, but Kramer's storyline revolved around a vacuum. I mean, yikes. Michael Richards really got screwed in this episode. So yeah, it's not the best Seinfeld episode. Missed opportunities by giving Jerry this dumb A story and not capitalizing on all the humor that could have been with the Elaine and George plots. Not to mention pretty much giving Kramer nothing. Blah, blah, blah all around. And I think that's all I can say about The Suicide. Thank you so much for listening, you guys, and I will see you next time.